What's the best upgrade for an older machine? Hi everyone, Leo Notenboom here for askleo.com with what turns into a very common question as our machines age. Here's one example. What's the easiest way, other than buying a new machine, to upgrade my 10-year-old computer? Now, of course, there is no blanket answer here. Best depends on the computer itself. It depends on what you're doing with the machine. It depends on your budget. It depends on a lot of different things. But I do have specific suggestions that I will give you in what I'll consider to be the order of importance or the order of impact. Number one, maximize the RAM in that machine. In other words, if your machine has 2 gigabytes of RAM, but the motherboard is capable of holding 4, put in 4. If it's only got 4 and the motherboard is capable of holding 8 or 16 or something like, maximize it. Put as much RAM in that machine as you possibly can. The catch, of course, is that I have to keep saying if the motherboard supports it. That will be your limiting factor. The motherboard does not have unlimited capacity. And it's also possible that you may already have maximum RAM for that motherboard installed, in which case there's no place left to go. But if you have the ability, if there's room, if your motherboard supports it, the first thing I do with almost every old machine that I run into is put in more RAM. Windows loves RAM. And especially with later versions of Windows and other operating systems, they expect more RAM. They expect the RAM of a relatively current machine as opposed to whatever was common 10 years ago. So by upgrading RAM, you are at least giving the operating system as much as possible for it to work with, and it will make the best use of it that it possibly can. The number 2 upgrade is actually changed, and I've often considered it almost a tie, a neck and neck tie for upgrading your RAM. Again, it depends on your system. If you've got an older spinning platter magnetic hard disk, an old HDD in there, replace it with an SSD. You'll be amazed. It will make a dramatic difference in the system's boot up for one thing, but just the overall performance of the machine. This is one where you're not necessarily limited by your motherboard. There are SSDs out there where you can simply remove the hard disk and replace it with an SSD of the same physical form factor, exactly the same height and width and plug configuration. You may or may not, depending on what you've got in your machine, decide to use this as an opportunity to get a bigger disk. That's fine. Go ahead, do that. SSDs have come down fairly dramatically in prices over the last few years. But if it's something that you can do, can't afford, then by all means, spend, I don't know, a couple $100 to get a replacement SSD. Do the move thing. The question a lot of people end up having, of course, is, well, great, how do I move from this hard disk to that hard disk? It's actually conceptually a very, very simple process. What you end up doing is backing up your entire existing hard disk using an image backup program like EaseUS To Do or Macroom Reflect. The free versions will do. You physically replace, you swap the hard disk for an SSD. Power things back up. You boot from the rescue media or recovery disk that was created by your backup software, and you restore the image of the hard disk to the new SSD. You may end up tweaking partition sizes when you're done, but the bottom line is it's really that simple. Stream everything off of the one hard disk, replace it, and stream everything back on, and you should be pretty close to being good to go. Now, beyond that, those are the 2 biggies in terms of performance, getting the most out of your computer's ability to actually do work. The next thing I would have you look at is consider improving your display. This goes a couple of different ways. One way is to literally get a new monitor. It's amazing how much better monitors are these days than they were, say, 10 years ago. They're bigger, they're cheaper, they're brighter, they've got higher resolutions, they're just better in almost every way. You may find that they include things like USB hubs and other features that may be useful to you. May not, but they may be there. This is one of those things that I invested in a while back. I'm actually looking at a fairly large monitor in front of me right now. And the neat thing about getting a new monitor, investing in a bigger monitor, is that you can replace the computer. If you do end up replacing your computer entirely, the monitor is still available and still usable by whatever you replace it with. Now, it is possible that you may need to look into the capabilities of the video card or the video hardware on your existing machine. They may not be up to enabling all of the features or the highest resolutions of your new monitor. That's okay. Two things. One is you can simply live with whatever the maximum is supported by your hardware, or you can consider upgrading the video card. Not something I do very often, but it's out there. Now, I do have to point out that so far, we've basically been assuming you're not really changing how you're doing your work. If you're running Windows, you continue to run Windows. I'm not even pushing you to upgrade Windows version. Whatever it is you have, much of what I've just discussed will simply work and give you a faster machine or a brighter display with the existing operating system you have. Another way to improve or increase the usable lifespan of an older computer, of course, is to replace the operating system. Switch to something that is specifically designed for lighter hardware, for less demanding hardware. And the approach there is typically to install a version of Linux, one of the distributions of Linux that are designed specifically for machines with less RAM and slower CPUs and so forth. They can actually make for a very useful machine for a very long time, much longer than the original machine's designed lifespan. Now, I have to say, this one varies a lot depending on you. If you're up for learning Linux or using Linux, and the things you do are the kinds of things that are supported by software that's available for Linux, then installing a distribution like Puppy Linux could very well make your machine last for a very, very long time. I know that I have in my basement, I think it's like a 12 or 14-year-old machine right now. It's actually kind of key to my backup strategy. It's running Ubuntu. It's running Ubuntu just fine. It's not something that I would run Windows 10 on. It probably isn't even supported on that machine. But I do have Ubuntu Linux down there running, and it's working great. It actually is doing a very fine job of making that machine, an old desktop machine of mine, last for a lot longer than perhaps we had originally expected. Finally, again, these are all the things you can consider doing to increase the usable lifespan of your machine, either by replacing the operating system, replacing pieces of hardware, upgrading, adding, whatever. At some point, it may just be cheaper. It may even be less frustrating and less work. Just bite the bullet. Get a new machine. Go ahead and do the deed. Right? It's not what you're asking. I get that. But I think I have to mention it out of a pragmatic sense of sometimes you could spend a lot of time and a lot of energy and sometimes a lot of money where you would just be better off by replacing the machine in its entirety and getting something that is as fast as our modern machines, as capacious as our modern machines in terms of both RAM and hard disk space, running modern operating systems that do basically way, way more than your older 10-year-old machine. Needs to be out there on the table. But hopefully I've given you some ideas for some things that you could look into when you want to increase the lifespan of your machine. For links, for updates, for comments, and more, visit askleo.com/6728. I'm Leo Notenboom. This is askleo.com. Thanks for watching.